Good morning, everyone. This is Ashton with Red Modeling Paint Studio, here with another PaintCast this morning. Glad you're all here. As you can see in the camera there, we've got a Legion Beast that we're going to be working on today, titling this PaintCast Dark Legion, because that's what Scott wanted here. He wanted some dark looking Legion. So we're going to go through painting this guy today. I've already got him based. I've already got all the putty work done, and I've got him primed as well. And in talking to Scott, what he wanted, as I mentioned, was a dark looking Legion. And we went back and forth on a couple different paint scheme ideas. And believe it or not, as history has shown on these paint casts, people like purple, and so that's what he wants, is a purple Legion. So the plan at this point is to paint the skin purple, and then to paint the chitin plates, or the chitin, or however you say that, but the armor plates along the back, head, and tail there, in a very dark black, blue, almost black color. So we'll be going through that. I'll be doing the purple skin, and then those black plates, doing some airbrushing with this guy, and getting that going. What I want to do here on the card real quick is just as I've done on other paint casts, we're just going to go through the paint recipes here and what we're going to use. We'll start with a fairly standard purple recipe that I've used on a lot of different things, and also blue as well, that we'll be using on those plates. So for the purple, this is the same base purple that I used on the Cephalix Army that I just finished painting. Grabbed the wrong color here, one second. It's equal parts sanguine base, beaten purple, and coal black. What we'll probably do also, just to darken it up a little bit more, is we're going to add just a touch of Tharmar black into that as well, just to deepen it up, darken it up just a little bit more. So let's start with that on this card. And for those of you who haven't seen me do this before, this is what I do. One of the first things I do when I'm starting a new figure is I put the colors that I'm going to use onto these little cards. These cards get sent back to the client who commissioned this, and it just helps kind of keep track of what colors are used where, what the colors look like, what the ratios for the mixes are, those sorts of things. And they're convenient to go back to when you haven't painted something for a while and you need to go back to how that color looks. Okay, so that's going to be about what the darkness of our skin is going to look like. And if I fade that out, you can see how that looks. It's very dark purple. I'm going to hold off on adding the black to the base color right now, though we will probably use this in a lot of the shading. So that's kind of what we're looking at there. Equal parts coal black, sanguine base, and beaten purple. Okay. We'll set that aside for you, Scott. Now the blue, we want to have the blue be dark, but we also want to have it pop as well, like this, particularly on like the edges of these plates here and in the streaking in the armor and stuff like that. So I'm thinking that we're going to base these armor plates in coal black, and then use a little bit of Signar Blue highlight on the very edges to create the popping highlight effect. So if we mix these together, kind of draw the coal black out and start working that Signar Blue highlight into it. You can see how that's going to, the two of those are going to contrast nicely with each other, and you'll go from a, this very dark blue black color into this Signar Blue highlight color, which should get some of the glare off of that there, which should give us a nice pop. If we need to, once we get it on the model and we see what it looks like, Scott, if I need to push this out further, I'll use a little bit of frostbite to do that. But I think this will work. I think this will work nicely. So set this aside now, and where I'm going to start at airbrushing wise today is I think I will actually start with the coal black, because if I'm not going to be doing any masking on this guy, I want it to have a very organic look. So I'm thinking that little bits of overspray here and there will actually help go towards the overall look that we're going for here. So so I'm going to go ahead and airbrush the coal black first on all the armor plates there, and then I'll come back in with the purple, and we'll go from there. So like I say, he is already primed, so we can go straight into the coal black. And grab that. Oh, and by the way, you guys have seen me use these water bottles before. Let me come out a little bit more. You guys have seen me use these before as for holding cleaner and water and things like that. I found these at Harbor Freight. They're like 99 cents for like a 3-pack. They hold a lot more liquid, and I don't have to refill them as much. So definitely pick some of those up if you do a lot of airbrushing. And my coal black is about empty here. I'm going to have to bust out a new bottle of it pretty soon, I think. So, Scott, when you get these back and you start working on this Legion yourself, don't worry so much about, you take one of the big, large beasts, for example, Legion beasts. You've got a lot of these armor plates on there and a lot of skin on there. When you're airbrushing it, just focus on keeping the majority of the darker color on these armor plates. A little bit of overspray is going to be okay, because that'll help create a more natural, organic look. When I've done for Trevor's Orange Scorn Army, I've done a lot of Crocs, and this is the way I'm doing this is very similar to how I did them. So it should it'll create a very similar result if you haven't seen those. So I'll maybe post a link to some pictures of his Crocs when we're done here, so that way you guys can see what they look like. So it's going to get a little noisy for a second, just turning my hood on, and we're going to go ahead and get going here. Sorry, I just had a clog I had to clear there real quick. Oh. And so you can see the overspray that's going onto the white skin there. Again, don't worry too much about that at this point. Alright, it'll all, when we're all done here, it'll all blend together really nicely. Okay. Let me clean this out real fast. That's actually kind of a cool look right there. The dark blue plates with the white skin. Definitely different. Just 1 second, guys. There's a clog here that I need to clear real fast. The way I'm doing it is I've removed the needle from my airbrush. You can see it there, and I'm just passing cleaner straight through. It's been about 3 or 4 weeks, I think, since I've cleaned my airbrush last, so it might be time to break it down and give it a cleaning. Good there. So let's get our purple mixed up now. Remember, purple is equal parts sanguine base, coal black, and beaten purple. Let me get a mixing cup here. Show you guys how I mix this up. We'll start with about 2 drops of each color. That should be enough for this model. It's one of the reasons why I like the dropper bottles, is it allows you to more precisely control your paint recipes. Thinner, I'm probably going to add about 5 or 6 drops, a little bit more. It's more of the consistency that you're looking for with the paint rather than a hardcore recipe. And this consistency is pretty good, and by that I mean, let me zoom in here, show you guys. So here's the paint, the autofocus there. It doesn't want to autofocus for me. Let me widen out just a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so you guys can see the paint there. When I pull it up the side, you see how it's kind of washing around those letters there and those numbers. That's about the consistency you want. Okay. Widen back out so you guys can see what I'm doing here. Transfer that to the cup and my airbrush. And now we're going to paint all the flesh now, the purple color. If I remember right, when Scott and I were talking about this paint scheme, one of the pictures that we looked at for ideas was of some Tyranids in 40K. And I have to say, seeing the purple and blue next to each other is very Tyranid-esque. You can see that the transition right now from the blue to the purple is pretty muted. That's going to be mitigated when I start doing my brush work on this. But you can also see too how, starting with this darker color and then going slightly with this more saturated color, the purple color, the overspray isn't such a big deal at this point. So, not sure why I lost my internet connection there. Hopefully it reconnects without an issue. But I've got this set up that it's going to continue recording despite losing the internet connection there. So you'll still be able to see all this in its fullness, Scott. So I'm not too worried about that right now. Okay, so that's looking pretty good as far as the purple goes. Alright, so the next thing I want to do here next thing we're going to do, Scott, is I'm going to now mix up a little bit of black. And we're going to do a little bit of shading with the black on the chitin plates and on the flesh as well. And this will help differentiate some of the color a little bit too. You want to mix this up a little thinner than your base color was, just because you're going to be getting in a little tighter with your airbrush, and you want to make sure it flows really well. So the color I'm using here is Starmar Black. Yeah, you can see that black showing up there on the screen. It looks pretty cool. Okay, and then I'm going to just take a little bit of this black now, and from the bottom here, add just a little bit. Just kind of doing like a zenithal shading. This is just going to help add to that dark and menacing look that you said you wanted. Alright, you can see how that's looking. So the last thing I'm going to do is now just take some straight beaten purple, and we're going to just airbrush a little bit of that on in a couple of small spots for some highlights, and then we'll get right into doing those armor plates. And you know, as I'm painting this too, Scott, I know you're going with these rock bases from Secret Weapon Miniature. What I would recommend we do as far as the color on those bases is, I say we stick with grays. Something like a Bastion gray with maybe a touch of blue into it just to cool it down a little bit would, I think, go really well with the purple and blue vibe that we got going on here. So, but we'll see how that goes. That's probably not going to happen in this episode today, so probably be the next one. Okay. Now what I want to do with the purple is just kind of focus on some of the highlights here. Just bringing some of that purple back that we had lost a little bit. Okay. That looks pretty good. I think we're gonna stop there with the airbrushing for now. Let me just clean my brush out here real quick, then we're gonna get on to some blue work here. Turn that off for now. I need a couple of brushes here. Set this aside. Just getting my wet palette here set up, Scott. Give me 1 second. Okay, so now that we more or less got our purples and our blacks laid out, there is some spots that, you know, like right under here, under this paw, that the airbrush didn't fully get to, so I'm going to have to, you know, touch that up and stuff. You know, right in under here, there's some of these armor plates that we're going to have to get. I'd like to define this line just a little bit more between the armor plate and the skin on both sides. Same with under here. So there's going to be a combination of two brush blending, just regular edge highlighting, glazing, that kind of thing that we're going to do here to bring out all the details on this model. So for those of you watching at home, if you got questions that you want to ask, feel free to pop them up in chat. I do check the chat from time to time, so I'd be happy to answer those as we move on here. On my wet palette, I'm just putting a little bit of the Sigma Blue highlight. I'm putting a little bit of Tharmar Black, and I'm putting a little bit of Coal Black. I'm keeping them all separate at this point because I'm going to be working with them all separately. And we're going to start with Tharmar Black, or Thamar Black, or however you say it, I don't know. And we're going to just work on working some black here along the edge between the armor plate and the skin. And this is just going to be done with the two brush blending. I'm just putting a nice thick heavy line of the black there. And then with my blending brush, I'm just going to soften that edge up. And makes that pop just a little more, just clears things up a little more between those two spots. And then while I'm here working in this area, I'm going to show you what we'll do with the blue armor plates. You want to mix up on your wet palette about a 50-50 mix of Coal Black and Sigma Blue highlight. Slightly watered down. Let's see what kind of color we got right there. Okay. And then you're going to want to pull your brush so that your brush stroke is ending at the edge of the armor here. And all you want to do is just kind of follow the edge, follow these streaks that are in the armor. And you're really not trying to blend anything at this point, Scott. You're just putting down a layer of this color. And it's okay if it's somewhat random and uneven, because that's what you want at this point. You want this armor to look, you know, natural, and it's not very organic. You want it to look more what's the word? Random and streaky, like. Oh gosh, I know it's a bad way to describe it. But you can already see the building up of the blue and the contrast that it's making. And you want to keep the streaks not all right next to each other. You want gaps between them. All right. You can see how that's looking. And then take some of the Signar Blue highlight and then a little bit of that 50-50 mix. And you can see the lightness that I have there. And then make these streaks even thinner than the ones before. Leaving more space between them and not taking up as much room on the surface. So shorter, smaller, thinner streaks. And this should actually be a fairly quick process, this part here. And then for the next highlight, we are going to take a little bit of the Manoff Blue, or excuse me, a little bit of the Frostbite, P3 Frostbite. And you're probably going to want to mix about a 2-to-1 ratio of Manoff White, or excuse me, a Frostbite and Signar Blue highlight. And you can see how light that color is. It's just kind of the next stage up. Okay, and keep these highlights very close to the edge of the armor plate, and again, covering less distance than before, and very thin on them. Okay, you see how that looks? You could probably even go one more if you wanted to. Let's try that. There's where that one is. You can see how light that one is. And this one, man, I'm just going to really very lightly, keeping this very close to the edge. There we go. That's looking pretty good. These little bumps sitting on the armor plates here, just touch the tip of those. Just add a little bit more in here. And this is, this is what you're doing. You're just going to kind of work this back and forth until you get the consistency that you're looking for. The important thing to remember to contribute to that overall dark look that you said you wanted, Scott, you want to keep the most bright highlight right at the edge, okay? And don't let that come down too far into the armor plate, or you're gonna lose some of that effect, okay? And I mean, even with the purple here, we're probably going to have to add some of push this purple a little bit towards the pink in some spots, just to have that purple stand out a little bit more. But here, this side's not finished. You can see how that looks. Compare that to this side with those armor plates, and you can see the big difference that it makes. It's quite a bit different. It looks pretty darn cool. The last thing you could do, and this is optional. Let me know if you want me to do this or not. But you can glaze a blue ink over these armor plates, and that'll just make the blue just pop a little further. But I actually kind of like this. I think this works out really nicely. So there you go. So what we'll do now is I'm just going to start working the other side here, and I'm just going to keep working these armor plates across the top. Remember, this first layer of blue that you put down, you can have those streaks be a little bit bigger, a little closer together, but the more bright you get with the streaking, the shorter you want them to be, the further apart you want them to be, just so you can create that effect of a good strong edge highlight. And you'll notice with some of these streaks, Scott, some are longer, some are shorter, some are wider, some are thinner, and that's just the part of the deal, is you're trying to just make it be random. and just slowly building up the effect. That's a little too thin. Yeah, that's the thing. Paint consistency is going to be important here, Scott. If the paint's too thin, it's just going to kind of, you know, spread. And what you're trying to do here is you're trying to make actual streaks in the paint. So, you know, try not to let that mixture get too thin, or you might run into some problems. Looks pretty good there. You highlight these. A little bit more of a highlight on those. Little dots or bumps or whatever they are. Okay. So now I think it's time to move on to some skin. Let me show you how that's going to be done right in here. So I think what we'll do is want to, you know, emphasize some of these, you know, spots like right here. So I'm just going to use a little coal black to deepen the shadow there. You can use the you know, the black airbrush, you know, from below to kind of guide where you're going to put your shadows. But, you know, by working just a little bit of coal black into this, you're avoiding you're desaturating the tone too much, or desaturating the color scheme too much rather. And save the black for the really hard shadow separation between, like, you know, the armor plates and the skin. See how that's looking? What I want to do now is I'm going to grab a little bit of a let me see, yeah, murderous magenta, why not? We're going to grab a little bit of murderous magenta. I'm going to mix a little bit of this with the beaten purple just to kind of create a highlight color and bring some of this purple out a little bit more. Probably doing about a 3-to-1 mix of beaten purple and murderous magenta. You really don't want to have that purple, go too pink. Let's see what we got there. And this, like these, his ribs right here, I'm just going to lightly glaze this onto the edge of those ribs. Onto some of the muscle here, top of the thigh. And I'm just kind of using the brush to blend it softly into the base color and the shadow color. Kind of like glazing it on. By keeping the color thin, you're able to just slowly build the layer up, and you don't have to worry about a ring or a really sharp line between the two colors because they're so thin and you're building them up in several different layers. That it really doesn't affect it too much, and the fact that it's such a dark base color also helps hide any of those types of things from happening. You'll just slowly build this up. You may have to wait a little longer than I am between layers. Here in Idaho it's pretty dry and hot right now, so the layers are drying pretty fast, and I'm able to work pretty quickly over them. I think murderous magenta and beaten purple are already fairly thin colors, and especially over other dark colors lend themselves to this type of painting pretty readily. The other thing you'll notice too, Scott, is the direction I'm pulling my paintbrush. Just like here, on these armor plates where I pulled back to the edge. It's the same thing here with this layering that I'm doing, is where you stop moving the brush at, okay, is where the highest concentration of paint is going to be. So that's how you kind of want to move across this model, is in that fashion where you're lifting the brush up where you want this color to be deposited with the most intensity. Build this up a little bit more, this color here. You can see how that purple is starting to show up a little more now. And you don't want to push your highlights too far, because again, that overall look that you're going for here is dark and menacing, so we want to stay as dark and menacing as possible. And when you start pushing those highlights too far, you're going to start detracting from that look. On the tail here, I'm just going to kind of drag the brush across the ridges of it on the bottom. We'll add some shadow color here in a minute on that, but this will just kind of pick up the edges of the highlights. Use a little bit of beaten purple now to reclaim some of the shadow on the face that was lost in the airbrushing. This base color down there. Down here where it's fairly dark black from the shadow, I'm just kind of glazing some of this purple, thin down beaten purple over the black. And all that's doing is just making it look less black and more like a deep purple, just with that really thin purple glaze over it. A little bit more of the highlight color now, picking up some of those highlights in the face. Actually, I'll let that dry for a minute. I'm just gonna pick up some of the highlights on around the shoulder here. Same with this shoulder here. Pretty dark and menacing, if you ask me, Scott. This is looking pretty good. Hope it's what you had in mind. I'll work a little bit of purple here. This is a fairly thin wash of the beaten purple. Sorry, it's off camera there. And I'm just working this in here to where a little bit of the overspray was, just to reclaim some of that flesh color, base tone. Same thing on this side here. And it's just a watered down mixture of the beaten purple. And all this is doing, Scott, is just where a little bit of that coal black overspray was a touch too strong. It's just putting some purple into it to get it to tie in just a little bit more with the base color of the flesh. Mixing a little bit of beaten purple and coal black just to accentuate some of these shadows here. I suppose a lot of this here, Scott, would be called glazing, what I'm doing. Glazing and wet blending. And you're just going to kind of keep working this skin back and forth with these shades of purple until you get what you're looking for. So the three real colors you're working with here or four colors you're working with are oh no, it's three. No, it is four. Sorry. Beaten purple, murderous magenta, okay, Tharmar black, and coal black. So those are the kind of the four colors that you're gonna just kind of hop around between as you go between the different highlights, shadows, and midtones here. Someone is asking if this is from Halo. No, this is from a game called War Machine, which is a tabletop miniature game like 40K or Fantasy, and this is from the faction called Legion, and it's not a Scythian. I forget what it's called. It's a medium. It's a light war beast. Reminds me a lot of the alien from Predator, or from the movie Aliens, actually. And gosh, I can't remember the name of it now. Makes me sound like a horrible host. Can't even remember the name of the thing I'm working on. I'm sure someone in chat will mention it. And my internet connection just went out again. Again, I'm not sure why, but I am recording, so we won't lose any of the information here. Alright. I think that's really about as far as I want to go with the purple skin, Scott. So I will keep, let's see here, we're just a little over an hour into this, so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to call that for the first day, okay, or for the first time working on this one. What I will do between now and the next time I'm streaming on this guy is I'll just finish painting all these armor plates across the back and the tail, pick out some of the details on here as far as grabbing these details and stuff like that, and then probably in your second one we're just going to do the base, I think. So it'll be pretty. This guy will go pretty quick. However, on the other Legion model that we're doing for you, the infantry model, this one will go a little longer. Looking at it, I think what we'll do, how we're going to tie these two paint schemes together, looking forward here, is there's going to be, I think I'm going to do your cloak here in the black, okay, armor in purple. I might reverse that. Skin is going to be a very light purple, okay, and then this fur back here, that's probably a good place to pull in some grays that will tie into the base. So anyway, this will be an interesting one to work on. So next time that I stream with your stuff here, we'll work a little bit more on the Legion Beast, and then we'll work more on the infantry model. But in the meantime, Scott, thanks for giving me the chance to work on this for you. It should be on YouTube here in the next couple of days. I apologize about some of the internet problems with the connectivity for those of you who are watching live. I'm not sure why my internet's cutting in and out. But stick around, because I'm going to take a break for a few minutes, and then I'll be coming back with working on some Wrath of Kings stuff. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll be back in about 10 minutes. Thanks.